All right, let's go to my panel now. Eric Mandel is the director of the Middle East Political Information Network. Thane Rosenbaum is a Middle East analyst and a distinguished fellow at NYU Law School. And gentlemen, they've asked us not to speculate, but we're going to do that anyway. And what we do know is that this peace plan is going to be released after June. It also reportedly includes a political section and an economic section. And there are reports that it will stop short of ensuring a fully sovereign state. Eric, assuming there is no land for peace deal, assuming Israel gets to extend sovereignty over the West Bank, why would Israel object to a sovereign Palestinian state? What would be the problem there?
Well, there are a lot of factions in Israel that, on principle, of the Greater Israel crowd, which is not the majority of Israelis, who would have a problem with it. I think most Israelis, if they could be, if you think 25 years ago, Israelis were in favor of a two states for two people solution. The problem is they've been kind of mugged by an intifada, multiple Gaza wars, and that they don't believe that two states is going to be something, the Arab version where two states is going to be one Arab state and one binational state of Israel. So it's a real problem for Israelis to really believe that unless they're
Is the issue that it would be a militarized state? I mean, is that the crux of the matter, Thane, that it needs to be a non-militarized state for Israelis to feel that they still have security over their borders?
And if it's a non-militarized state, Michelle, it's not a sovereign state.
Right.
And that's the problem, that there would be many conditions that the Israelis would feel more comfortable if they could guarantee and assure their own national security. But the problem is, which is the reason that these other deals have fallen through, is it doesn't ever seem that the Palestinians are meaningfully interested in statehood. They're more interested in Israel not having a state of their own.
And the new Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Mohammed Shaitea, he's already said that this peace plan is dead on arrival. As you said before, arguably any peace plan would be dead on arrival, but he's already sight unseen said that they're not interested. And Jason Greenblatt is trying to appeal to the actual Palestinian people themselves, sending out a couple of tweets saying that perhaps something wonderful can happen to the Palestinian people if this actually comes through. And if we have those tweets, let's pull them up. And that he's trying to get the Palestinian people perhaps to pressure their leadership in coming to the negotiating table, seeing there that they need to do something to improve their own lives. Could that work, Thane? Could that work if the Palestinian people start to understand that their lives can be improved, that there will be economic benefits, and that their leadership is not allowing them to go in that direction?
Well, in theory, Michelle, that would be perfect if he could make his case directly to the Palestinian people. The problem is, again, which people? Are they the Gazans or the West Bank? Those groups don't even speak to each other.
Right.
Hamas still has a charter that is manifestly genocidal in nature about Israel. And the West Bank Palestinians, too. I mean, look, there's been a stabbing intifada, a car ramming intifada. It's not clear whether the national aspirations of the Palestinians to reclaim the olive trees of the past would supersede their interests in economic incentives. And that's what the Trump administration is banking on.
Eric, to Thane's point, and we make this point over and over again because it is so critical, when we say Palestinians, who does that encompass? Because as Thane says, Hamas and Fatah don't have any kind of unity government. Hamas is still explicitly sworn to Israel's destruction. So is there any point in having a deal with the Palestinian Authority if Hamas is not on board?
Well, I think some of the rumors out of this plan are that you deal with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and then if the Gaza ever goes under Palestinian Authority control, then it will be extended there. I mean, what's going on with Hamas now is just basically trying to keep the calm, mow the grass, have Qatari money come in. So it's not a situation where you can think of this as, it's really, if you will, three states. Mm-hmm. Israel, you're talking about the West Bank, and you're talking about Gaza. So it is not a straightforward situation. You're not going to have negotiations with Hamas.
Thane, very quickly, if there is Arab support for this without European support for this, could this happen?
Well, the Trump administration is banking on that too. They're suggesting, thinking that the European Union has enough to worry about with Arab and Muslim assimilation throughout their continent, and that the real influence will come from what was the former Arab League,
right.
Saudis, Egyptians, Jordanians, and Qataris. The question is, they don't speak for the Palestinians, and the Palestinians are still determined.
The theory is that they may come together and impose this plan on the Palestinians. We will continue this conversation and more, so Thane and Eric, please stick around. All right, let's bring back my panel, Eric Mandel and Thane Rosenbaum. Eric, is that what got Prime Minister Netanyahu re-elected, the fact that he does represent Israel so well on the world stage and that he does hold his own with world leaders like Russia's Putin?
I think that's part of it. I think the reason he won is because he declared himself Mr. Security, and Israelis, when the ballot box, they're there, they think of security. We as Americans think of pocketbook issues, and they trusted him, and he has come through. Its economy is good, but the natural reaction that should have happened here would have been to have a great unity government, if only he wasn't under a threat of indictment.
Such wishful thinking.
Well, it could have. You can then get rid of the extortion of the small parties.
Right.
You can come to a consensus on what Israel's real military needs are, its defensible borders, and it will make them diplomatically much stronger, as opposed to people just disparaging him, saying he's just a right-wing kind of guy, because they're considered center and center-left. So Israel could have spoken with a large, loud voice. Likud is not naturally a religious party.
No, it's not. But now, Thane, it has to contend with a potential coalition with Shas and United Torah Judaism, ultra-Orthodox parties that have performed better in this election than they have in the past. They have 16 Knesset seats, and they're going to be an obstacle for Prime Minister Netanyahu on several fronts. One of them, as Eric alluded to, is military conscription, because up until now, ultra-Orthodox Israelis have not been asked to serve in the military. How do you see this challenge playing out?
And the question morally and politically is, why should religious studies exempt people from military service?
That's certainly the point of Avigdor Lieberman.
And Lieberman is known for two things. One thing is he hates Hamas, which is one of the reasons why he withdrew his support as defense minister in the government. The other thing is he's the head of the Russian Jewry and Israel Jewry, and they're avowedly secular. And so for them, the exemption and the lack of conscription for the ultra-Orthodox makes no sense. Look, Israel is not a theocracy. This is not Iran. And so what the ultra-Orthodox are essentially saying is Torah study is tantamount to national service. And that's not something that Israel Beitenu is.
And they were able to make that argument in the early founding years of Israel. But now that there's 1 million plus ultra-Orthodox Israelis, how is the Prime Minister going to handle this challenge when we know that Shas and United Torah Judaism are going to oppose this vehemently?
Well, this is the point that Eric was making a moment ago. The ultra-Orthodox have had a history in Israeli politics of holding prime ministers hostage to these religious issues, right? This is the whole idea of, can women pray at the wall? Mm-hmm. It alienated American Jewry. This is not necessarily an issue that Netanyahu would have cared that much about, but he was forced to care so much about it because his coalitions always depend on cobbling together the ultra-Orthodox and other religious parties.
This is probably going to be one of the first things that the Knesset reassesses. So are we seeing the coalition break apart just as it was put together?
Well, I think the leverage is really with the ultra-Orthodox parties, because they have no place to go. But Bibi, if they have no place to go, and Bibi does not want to go to another election. So they are going to, this is a transactional arrangement. This is not based upon ideology. The transaction is—
They're not going to agree.
Well, they'll agree to get a lot of funding to extend the draft bill that Lieberman wants to have is not going to happen, or it'll be watered down, or Bibi will figure out some way to finagle around it. And so they also are going to get some extra funding for the yeshiva students. And so they can, I think, win in the long run, and that's just going to separate and hyperpolarize Israeli society even more than it is now.
Thane, this compromise bill by Lieberman, do you see the ultra-Orthodox parties going for it?
No, I don't.
Even with extra funding and other concessions?
Look,
even with Netanyahu's ability to exert his political magic?
One thing I can think of that they'll buy is the annexation of the Bloc C, Area C. Because remember, when Netanyahu raised this a week before the election, one of the things he was doing was courting the ultra-nationalist parties. So there was some thought that he was trying to buy them on a number of things, including a new law that would exempt prime ministers from being indicted while in office. So again, it's all, as Eric is saying, this is all about leverage. And the question is, what else can they extract from him if they're not going to get what they ultimately want, is a permanent exemption from military draft.
Right, and with 16 Knesset seats, that's a lot of leverage. Thane touched on the peace plan between Israel and the Palestinians. We spoke about it earlier. Prime Minister Netanyahu has a very good relationship with President Putin. Now we have Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, trying to bring the Russians into this process. He has a trip scheduled to meet with Putin, and he wants them to put together some kind of peace plan to counter the Trump administration's plan. Given that Prime Minister Netanyahu has this relationship with President Putin, do you see him being forced to at least come to a negotiating table with the Palestinians and the Russians?
Well, they have shared interests, if not shared values, and Israel needs Putin really for its existential problem, which is in the north, which is with Iran in Syria, and Iran in Hezbollah, Iran militias in Iraq, all things that could threaten Israel from the north and from its east. So he's not going to say no, but his bread is buttered with President Trump. And the question is, does he really know what President Trump is planning to put out? Some people, I spoke to some Likud leaders who aren't 100% sure that this has been coordinated with Bibi, but bringing in the Russians, trusting the Russians, who are going to carry the water a little bit more for the Palestinians and the intransigents, I think Bibi will give lip service, but he's too smart to know that that's a place as a path to reconciliation.
But then does he have to show up at Russian-led peace talks?
He might, but I'm not so sure the Russians are going to get that involved. You know, when it comes to their promiscuous foreign policy in that area, Iran is really the concern, which Netanyahu has always pointed out. Putin's interest was in Syria. It's not really with the Palestinians. It's never been with the Palestinians. He may want to, again, symbolically demonstrate that he's relevant and it's not just President Trump, but I'm not sure his heart is really in the Palestinian cause.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Thane Rosenbaum and Eric Mandel. Appreciate your perspective, analysis, and speculation.